Okay. So burrowing owls are only found in the Americas. They're found from Canada to the southern tip of South America at Tierra del Fuego. And in North America, we have two subspecies. We have the Florida burrowing owl, which surprisingly is found in Florida. Then we have the western burrowing owl, which is found west of the Mississippi River into southern Canada and northern Mexico. In California, we have both resident owls that live here year round, and we have migratory individuals. They come down every October, November from Canada, Washington, and Oregon, spend the winter either in California or use it as a stopover site going to Mexico, and then move back up north for the breeding season. They're about 9 inches tall, a quarter of a pound, and have mottled and brown and white plumage. And the photos on the right-hand side, they're of the juveniles, so they have a uniform buffy coloration. There are about 140 different species of owls in the world, and burrowing owls are unique, being the only owl in the world that uses underground burrows. Surprisingly, they don't make the burrows. I'll talk about that in a few seconds, but they do use those burrows for nesting and to escape from predators. They're a diurnal, nocturnal species, although if you've ever seen them during the day, they just stand at the burrow entrance, not a lot of activity. In the breeding season, they may hunt within a couple of feet off the burrow if they have young. But once dusk comes, they're very, very active. An unusual aspect of the young is they can mimic the sound of a rattlesnake. So if a predator approaches the burrow, you can often hear that rattlesnake sound. It's actually very realistic. And some of them, not all of them, have a tendency to place dung and other decoration around the burrow. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. We're also one of only 3 raptors, I believe, in California that can hover midair when they're foraging. The other 2 species being American kestrels and white-tailed kites. And for an owl, they're very unusual because they're semi-colonial. We have seen them in big colonies. We've also seen them nest just a single pair on their own, but in general, they're very tolerant of other burrowing owl pairs. The type of habitat that they use is short grasslands. Unfortunately, short grasslands are in very short supply in California, and especially here in Santa Clara Valley. In the 1980s, we had about 250 locations with burrowing owls. We're now down to 4 historical sites, and then we have 4 reintroduction sites. And grasslands have been turned into highly developed areas or agricultural areas. And even the remaining grasslands, the vast majority of the plant species are non-native, especially invasive weeds like tumbleweed, fennel, mustard. They grow very, very tall, much taller than the burrowing owls, which is an issue for burrowing owls. So they have a symbiotic mutualistic relationship with California ground squirrels. So the ground squirrel makes their burrow and the owl moves into them. So they don't live in the same burrow together, but they do live in the same colony. If you ever see an active burrowing owl burrow, there's a lot of activity there. There'll be whitewash, which is his poop. There'll be pellets, prey remains, and decoration in the breeding season. Ground squirrels are actually a very clean species. They even make a latrine to poop in it. But I've seen burrowing owls move into a ground squirrel burrow for several weeks or several months. And when the activity gets a bit too much for the owl moves out. The ground squirrel moves in straight away, cleans everything up. Then within 2 or 3 days, the owl comes back and kicks that poor little ground squirrel out of the burrow after done all that cleaning for it. So it's a free maid service that the burrowing owls get. But it is a very beneficial relationship between the 2 species. They both share the same predators, and both of them will go underground when the other one makes their warning call for a predator approaching. A recent study conducted by Lisa Thompson at Moffett Airfield using trail cameras showed that ground squirrels were more likely to give the warning call with an approaching predator, and the burrowing owls benefited by that. Ground squirrels are actually known as a keystone species because they play such a pivotal role in the environment. Another protected species, tiger salamanders, live the majority of their lives in ground squirrel burrows. Most of their prey items are burrowing owls, such as rodents and insects, and lizards we found in the ground squirrel burrows. All that digging aerates the soil. The squirrels bring organic material in, which decomposes, adds nutrients to the ground. A lot of other species, such as hawks, eagles, badgers, foxes, and coyotes, depend on ground squirrels as a food supply. So, very important species in grassland environments. But burrowing owls will also live in artificial burrows. The photo on the bottom left-hand corner is what our artificial burrows look like. It consists of an irrigation valve box, that's the box on the right-hand side, and a flex drain pipe to simulate a ground squirrel burrow. So we got this original design from San Jose Airport. Jack Barkley was using this design for the burrowing owls at that location. And he used a 4-inch diameter flex drain pipe because a ground squirrel typically makes a 4-inch diameter burrow. We installed that same design that he used, but we had no success at all. I think just one owl temporarily used our artificial burrows. So I spoke to Jack Barkley one time and I asked him, why does he think he has more success with the exact same design of artificial burrows? So San Jose Airport, they don't encourage ground squirrels near the runways or the taxiways because they attract birds of prey, which are potential collision with aircraft. They were blocking up the ground squirrel burrows and making these artificial burrows on the periphery of the airport to encourage the burrowing owls to move away from the taxiways. So because they were reducing the amount of ground squirrel burrows there, the owls had no choice but to use these artificial burrows. But one day I saw a burrowing owl at a ground squirrel burrow and it started making the entrance of the burrow larger with its beak and its claws. I said, maybe they don't like the 4-inch diameter pipe. So we moved to a 6-inch diameter pipe. We put in the artificial burrows on a Friday, and that Monday, the first pair of burrowing owls moved into the artificial burrows. And during the 25 breeding season, out of all our sites, every pair of burrowing owls was using an artificial burrow, except for one pair was using a ground squirrel burrow. The artificial burrows, there's a lot of benefits to them. They're more durable. We have photos of a non-native red fox trying to dig up an artificial burrow. It came to the pipe, kept digging for a couple of feet, and then gave up because some predators are capable of digging into a ground squirrel burrow. Driving over burrows, sometimes ground squirrel burrows can collapse. The artificial burrows are a lot sturdier. More importantly, on some of the artificial burrows, we can access the nest chambers. When it comes to banding the chicks, we can retrieve all the chicks and band the entire family in 20 minutes. If we have to use walk-in traps at the entrance to the burrow, it might take 4 to 6 hours just to catch half of the young. So artificial burrows are really beneficial. So I mentioned the decoration at the burrow entrance. In the breeding season, some males, not all of them, will decorate the burrow entrances. Nobody knows for sure why they do this. One hypothesis is they use animal dung, such as cattle, and it's possible that insects are attracted to the dung, which the owls eat. But not all owls use animal dung. One hypothesis is maybe the dung disguises the smell of the burrow. So if a fox or a badger came along smells cow manure as opposed to a burrowing owl, maybe it's less likely to dig up the burrow. And the last hypothesis is maybe the males do this to let other males know that the burrow is active. But like I mentioned, not all burrowing owls do this. They'll also use human atoms as well. So both of these photographs here, there's insulation, there's plastic, there's bits of paper, bit of clothing. We found cigarette butts, cheese sandwiches. I had one pair of owls with 3 pairs of women's tights. I'm not sure if those owls had a fetish or something or where they even got the tights from in the first place. But it's kind of strange. Different owls use different materials. But they seem to like it. And studies have shown that when biologists have removed the decoration, the owls bring it back again. So it's obviously something that they do like. So some of the research projects we've done on burrowing owls, we've known for a very, very long time in Santa Clara County. There was 2 long-term studies done based on 20 years of monitoring of banded burrowing owls that only approximately 50% of the pairs were reproducing. And they only had, on average, 3 chicks. whereas they can actually lay up to 12 eggs, but we never saw more than 6 or 8 chicks in our study area. So we thought that maybe the diet is limiting reproductive success. So for my thesis, I collected 3,092 pellets. Here's a photograph, some pellets in the top right-hand corner. And I analyzed those pellets over 2 breeding periods and 1 non-breeding period. It takes about 20 minutes to analyze 1 pellet. So for the duration of that study, I had no social life. I even used to have nightmares because I kept all those pellets in my freezer. And I would have nightmares that the refrigerator would open up and millions of cockroaches and earwigs and beetles would come running out of the fridge. It never materialized, but it's a lot of work. But what I found out was 98% of the diet is invertebrates, and the number one species was earwigs. So burrowing owls, when they're going out foraging, they only capture one prey item at a time. So if you have 6 or even 10 babies to feed, and you're bringing back one earwig each time, most of those young are not going to survive. So we do know, based on the pellet analysis, that diet is a limiting factor in reproductive success. So we knew that was something that we had to address. Then another unfortunate thing we found with banding results was the amount of inbreeding in our population. So our populations historically in Santa Clara County have all been urban areas around the southern portion of the San Francisco Bay. They're very small sites. Burrowing owls only live for about, on average, 5 years. The longest we found was 8 years. They breed 1 year after hatching. So we've seen a high degree of inbreeding. So what you're looking at there is a genealogy chart for 3 young owls that were hatched in 2022. So on the top is the maternal genealogy lineage, and down the bottom is the male genealogy. So if you look at the female on the far right-hand side, you'll see the pink box and the green box. That's the pink is the female, and the green is the male. It's the same individuals. So they had 2 young, and those 2 young paired up the following year and produced offspring. So those offspring got together. They're actually cousins. And then for the female's lineage, you'll see that red and kind of like mustard colored box. So that female produced the male offspring there. And then the following year, that female got together with her male offspring and they reproduced. What's really sad is that those 2 individuals, that male and that female, are also on the male's lineage. So you have a lot of inbreeding with these small populations. Because at some of our sites, we only have 2 to 3 pairs left. And historically, some of these sites, such as San Jose International Airport and Moffett Airfield, they historically had over 100 burrowing owls. San Jose International Airport has had no breeding burrowing owls for the past couple of years. And last year, Moffett only had 1 breeding pair. These are not sustainable populations. So I can't emphasize enough about the vegetation. If you've ever seen a burrowing owl in the daytime, it just sits at the burrow entrance, especially during the breeding season. And I mentioned that they're only 9 inches tall. If the vegetation grows taller than the burrowing owl, it can see predators approaching the burrow, especially snakes. They'll actually abandon the burrow. So at all our sites, we either have grazing or mowing or a combination of both. People often ask, well, how did the burrowing owls survive before you start putting in all these artificial burrows or started mowing these areas? Well, we had extensive grasslands in California previously, and we also had a lot of herbivores, which very few of them exist. So we have to manipulate these grasslands to keep the habitat conducive to burrowing owl ecology. So I'm going to talk about some of our conservation projects. All these projects are funded by the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency. So burrowing owls are one of the covered species by the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency. And if it wasn't for this agency, I firmly believe that burrowing owls would probably be extirpated in our area, because the sites where the Habitat Agency is funding and implementing the burrowing owl conservation methods, all the populations are increasing. However, at sites where they're not implementing these conservation issues, the burrowing owls have already become extirpated or on the verge of becoming extirpated. So one of those projects is the Juvenile Overwintering Project. So I mentioned that we have inbreeding with burrowing owls, and they don't live very, very long, on average 3 to 5 years. So this program was created to address those two issues and help with reintroduction. So we have permits to capture 30 juveniles at the end of the breeding season. So we capture those juveniles. We try to take them from as many different burrows as possible. We take feather samples from them. We send them off to a lab and they sex the individuals for us. And then originally, we don't do it anymore. We've done it on the first few years we've done the project. We had blood samples taken from the owls and they were sent to Colorado State University. And they done a genetic study on the owls. Then they would tell us which male to pair up with each female the following year to increase genetic diversity. In the following breeding season, we bring them back to a site, whether it's an existing site or a reintroduction site, and we construct these artificial burrows. You can see the two top photographs. It's called a soft release or reintroduction program. We put the owls in there and keep them there for a couple of weeks in an enclosure. And you can see down the bottom, you can see the eggs and the chicks. So we're increasing genetic diversity by pairing up the individuals. Those juveniles, burrowing owls on average have a 75% mortality rate in their first year. So because these 30 juveniles are kept in a facility away from predators, we're increasing their survival rates. And people have tried relocating adult burrowing owls in the past. But because they're site tenacious and have burrow fidelity, a lot of these relocations have failed because when you release owls at a new site, they have a tendency to return to the original site where they have reproduced. But because we're using juveniles who have never bred, we've had very, very high success rates with our reintroduction program. And actually, one of our sites, we only done 2 years of relocating owls and then we stopped because we had very high survival rates. We just ran out of area to introduce any more owls because the program was so successful. Banding. So banding helps identify individuals. We know that some owl pairs are monogamous, some are polygamous. We know how long that they live for. The longest in our area was 8 years and 2 weeks, I believe. We can monitor their movement patterns. So banding is critical to monitor any population to help us understand what's going on with that population. And then in the early 2020s, we started a supplemental feeding study. So we did know that quality prey is a limiting factor to breeding success. So the first year that we started the supplemental feeding project, we start feeding dead mice to the burrowing owls. We only fed half the burrowing owls in our project sites. The other half were left unfed. So we're not replacing the diet, we're just supplementing the diet. And in the first year, we saw great success with the program. Every pair that we fed successfully reproduced and had more chicks than the pairs that were unfed. So we had planned to do this study for several years, but based on the results, we decided to feed all the pairs at all sites the following year. And our success rates really increased dramatically. We got 100% breeding success at several sites. On average, is 90 to 100% breeding success every year. We doubled the amount of chicks that they were producing. We weighed the chicks compared to the ones that were unfed the first year, and they were heavier chicks, which increases their survival rates. And in 1 year, we actually had a double brood. So burrowing owls will double clutch if the first clutch fails. Double brooding is very, very rare with burrowing owls. Since we started supplemental feeding, we had at least one double brood. So this is only a short-term program. We're also planting a lot of low-growing, drought-tolerant California natives. Although burrowing owls prefer short vegetation, rodents do not like the short vegetation. They want the taller vegetation. So on the periphery of our breeding sites, we're planting all these natives to naturally encourage rodents to increase the prey base naturally. Then camera monitoring is very important to our program. It helps us identify the individuals. So these two photographs are of the same nest. The top photograph, it's impossible to see the bands or identify the bands. So we have different color bands, and each one has unique alphanumeric code. So sometimes we have to go through 10,000 photographs just to identify one leg band. So the one down the bottom, you can actually see its leg band. But monitoring with the cameras also helps with identifying how many young that we have. What's interesting about burrowing owls, I don't know if it's common with other bird species, when the young are less than 21 days old, their tarsus or their leg is so thick that we cannot put a band on the leg. We have to wait until they're over 21 days old. So the cameras help us identify that age period. And we don't want them to get too old because they're more likely to move to adjacent burrows. We want to capture them all in the same burrow. It just saves time. So the camera monitoring really helps with that. And it also helps us to see what else is going on there. What other species are at the burrows? You can see a coyote, a mountain lion down the bottom. And we can also see what they're eating. The top burrowing owl is eating an alligator lizard, and the bottom one is eating a field cricket. So monitoring is it's non-intrusive, and we get a lot of beneficial data from it. I mentioned that we have this overwintering program. We also have a captive breeding program. And here's the facility that the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency constructed in Santa Clara County. So we're not doing the day-to-day feeding of the owls. That's all done by the Wildlife Education and Rehabilitation Center. They feed them on a regular basis. We just do the weighing. We weigh the owls once a month to make sure they're increasing in their health. And we're monitoring the captive breeding program at this facility. I just want to emphasize that WERC does all this work at no cost for the program, which is a significant amount of work. So last year we had 3 pairs in our captive breeding program. Those 3 pairs will be kept for 2 years in the facility. The young will be released every year. And then on the 3rd year, the adults are released into the wild, and we take in another couple of pairs. So we've only been doing this for 4 years, I think it is, and very, very successful. Every pair has reproduced in captivity. And then those juvenile overwintering owls, they're kept in this large facility. Here's some photographs of some of those individuals. Remember, this way we're reducing mortality rates, which is about 75% for juveniles in their first year. And we're also increasing genetic diversity. Then another partner we have is the Peninsula Humane Society. So if we have any issues with the burrowing owls, if there's any sick or injured individuals, we send them over to PHS for treatment. If any owls need quarantine period, they're also sent in there. Or if any juveniles or adult owls have ticks or any other parasites, they're also sent there for treatment. And the Peninsula Humane Society also provides all their services for free for this program, which we really appreciate. And then lastly, just the last couple of years, we started monitoring the owls using solar-powered tracking units. So this is what one of our little backpacks look like. So this allows us to monitor the owls 24/7. So the cameras and monthly surveys that we conduct at the sites, there is a limitation to what we can find out with those site visits. You can't get up close to the owls. And as they are a nocturnal species, especially when it comes to foraging, we can't really see what's going on, especially after dark. So this tracking project has been very beneficial to let us see what's going on. So what's the purpose of the project? We wanted to find out, are the owls moving off-site when they're foraging? What's the interaction between individuals at a site? How far do they travel? And the young juveniles, we know some of them do move off site the first year. Sometimes they come back the following year. We want to know exactly where were they moving to. So the program has helped us address a lot of those questions. So you can see a lot of colored dots here. This is 5 different individuals. Matthew mentioned the Alviso project site. This is 5 different individuals, and the tracking units, we're only taking information at nighttime. We don't normally take the information during the daytime because the owls are at the burrow entrance. So what we found out, which was very interesting, there's very little overlap when they're foraging within the same site. We always knew that burrowing owls were territorial when it came to their nests. We presumed that they foraged close together. We've observed them at nighttime, close enough together, but there isn't that much overlap, which is very, very interesting. But this is why it's important to have a lot of these areas. But there are limitations at all our urban sites. They're actually little islands surrounded by development. If you ever look onto Google Earth at all the historical sites, the urban historical sites, over the years, more and more development is encroaching up to these grassland areas. And at all these sites, we have many other species. We've had a pair of golden eagles nest at this particular site, the first pair in over 100 years on the valley floor of Santa Clara County. We've had 3 pairs of red-tailed hawks, a pair of white-tailed kites, a pair of barn owls, and a pair of American kestrels, all nesting at the same site. All these individuals are either competing with burrowing owls for the same limited prey items, or some of them are actually predators of burrowing owls. Just a limitation of the available sites. And this is one reason we started the reintroduction program away from the urban areas down to southern parts of Santa Clara County. We're trying to move owls into areas where there's room for expansion and where they can forage in adjacent fields and where the populations can naturally expand. So are the programs successful? So this bar chart here shows data for the number of adults and number of young from 2020 to 2025. So the orange part of the bar are the wild individuals at the sites. So if you look at from 2020 on the left-hand side to 2023, you can see the orange bar contracting. That's the number of wild individuals are being reduced at these sites for a combination of factors. There's high disturbance factors, loss of habitat, loss of ground squirrel burrows, low reproductive rates due to diet, and also loss of habitat. Then the blue part of the bar is the overwintering owls. These are the juveniles that are released 1 year after capture. And then the red is the captive breeding program. So you can see the blue lines are starting to increase from 2020 to 2023. And then after several years of doing the reintroduction program, the captive breeding program, the juvenile overwintering program, and the supplemental feeding, you can see a big increase in the orange section of the bars. The wild individuals, which are actually descendants of the captive breeding and also the overwintering program, they're also starting to expand, which is really beneficial. And it's great to see the reintroduction into new locations. Every site that we've released owls into to date, and there's 6 sites in total, have all been successful. So our historical breeding sites, the urban areas, are declining, apart from the Alviso project site, where all the reintroduction sites are doing exceptionally well. There is just a graph from 2014 when we started partnering with the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency and implementing these projects. Initially, we just started doing management at the sites, vegetation management, putting in artificial burrows. Then around 2022, 2023, we started the overwintering program, the captive breeding program, and reintroduction program. So 2025 has been a highly successful year. We had over 100 burrowing owl young in 2025, and survival rates are actually increasing as well. So overall, the program has been very successful. And I've mentioned a couple of organizations. One first is the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency, which has been instrumental in turning around this decline in burrowing owls and funding all these projects. These projects can be quite expensive, and the Habitat Agency has been pivotal in the survival and expansion of this program. Then I mentioned work and PHS. They're providing their services free. I could probably do a whole nother presentation just on all these different organizations which are partnering to try and protect the burrowing owls. But I also want to mention Santa Clara Valley Bird Alliance. So historically, the Bird Alliance has been probably the largest organization that historically was helping with the burrowing owls. Not so much in actual conservation, but more in advocacy and education. I want to single out Shani Kleinhaus, who's been instrumental in going to city councils and speaking on behalf of the burrowing owls, reviewing CEQA documents, writing hundreds of letters to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, United States Department of Fish and Wildlife, multiple cities who are developing a lot of these burrowing owl historical areas, and also former mitigation areas. Some of these mitigation sites were required to have 5 years of mitigation. They didn't always follow through. So the Bird Alliance has been instrumental in trying to encourage these organizations to move forward. So it's not just Talon Ecological Research Group that's doing all this work on the burrowing owls. It's a multitude of different organizations. And this is probably only the tip of the iceberg. There's also hundreds of volunteers involved in these projects. And if it wasn't for all these different organizations, I know for a fact, based on the number of sites that we've lost to date, there'd be no burrowing owls. So I mentioned I'd done my thesis on the diet of burrowing owls. That was back in 2007, when there was 7 sites I was conducting my thesis on. Of those 7 sites, only 2 of them presently have burrowing owls, and that was only in 2007. I mentioned already Moffett and San Jose Airport historically had over 100 burrowing owls. The airport has none at the moment, and Moffett only has 1 breeding pair. And the Alviso project site, which is a partnership between Talon Ecological Research Group, the Santa Clara Valley Bird Alliance, and funded by the Habitat Agency. That was one of the smallest historical sites. That's now the largest urban burrowing owl site in the county. So there is hope for this species. It will require a lot more work. We're getting there. We're learning a lot of information. But really like to thank everybody who's participated, and especially the Bird Alliance who's been pivotal in helping these burrowing owls. So that's it. If anybody has any questions.
Yeah, Phil, that was amazing. Congratulations on all the fantastic work. I'm going to ask a couple questions and leave some time for people in the audience to come up with questions. But of all the work that you've done with the owls, what would you say is the most useful insight you've had after observing the birds and studying them so closely?
I mean, useful as in conserving them?
Yes.
Um, it's hard to say because the 2 pivotal things they need is burrows and short vegetation. Um, Mowing can be very, very expensive. Um, and when we're mowing, we mow to target the ecology of burrowing owls, and we typically do 2 mowings per year. The first mowing is done around February, March, April, when owls are first choosing their burrows. So it's important that the vegetation is short during that time period. The second mowing is when young are emerging from the burrows. Again, you want to have short vegetation so they can move to adjacent or nearby burrows. Unfortunately, it depends on the site because you have a lot of invasive weeds. So our mowing is not targeting the seed production of a lot of these weeds. So that's an issue. And then with grazing, um, we've had cattle graze and we've had sheep and goats graze. With grazing mammals, you can't, it's difficult to force them to graze immediately around the burrow, which is most important. Um, Cattle are good at eating grass, not the weeds. Goats will eat everything, including, we found, artificial burrows. So they're not actually good species to have on site. Ideally, what you'd want to have is a combination of both grazing. So it's critical to have short vegetation. It's critical to have the burrows, a healthy ground squirrel population. But we also know supplemental feeding to double the amount of young that you have and to have 100% breeding success is really important. But then again, with these small populations, reducing inbreeding is also important. So it's really a combination of all the different factors together. And then the research associated with that, whether it's monitoring, camera trapping, or the tracking study.
Oh, great. So it sounds like a lot of insights came out of it, and
Yes.
many of them were really very useful. I saw someone whose name was just iPhone who had his hand up a little while ago. I don't see the question here, but I do see some other questions. Maybe we'll come back to him. Let me see. Question from Cindy. What about the burrowing owls in Palo Alto Baylands? Are they part of the conservation effort too?
There unfortunately are no breeding burrowing owls left in Palo Alto. There was historically when I did my thesis in 2007, we had breeding burrowing owls. The burrowing owls there now are migratory burrowing owls. They arrive around October, November, and then leave around February, March. Um, Palo Alto is located on top of a closed landfill, which creates issues. They don't necessarily want ground squirrels digging into the cap for the landfill. So landfills can often be difficult sites to have breeding burrowing owls if you don't have a good management plan implemented to address both the requirements of a closed landfill and the requirements of burrowing owls. So
Mhm.
they're only wintering owls that they're
Right.
observing at that location.
Yeah, I just saw one the other day.
Yeah.
Nice, reliable place to see them there. Mary Murphy's asking, what has happened to the owls at Shoreline Park?
Shoreline, unfortunately, that population declined just in the last 2 years. Again, it's a closed landfill. It's very, very difficult to manage a species that needs burrows in the ground. When that ground is also cap to prevent methane leakage. You don't want ground squirrels digging in and letting methane gas. But historically, shoreline did have an increase in their population. Unfortunately, last 2 years, population is decreasing.
Hmm, that's too bad. That was a large population there for a while.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Yeah. A question from Arcana. Thanks so much for the fantastic presentation, such amazing research and work. The question is, where do you reintroduce the large group of offspring, 100, given they are so territorial while foraging? And the second part of the question is, what have you found has set the offspring up for success?
Well, we don't introduce 100 at a time. We only introduce the maximum we've ever done is 10 pairs at a time. So we introduce them in phases, a certain amount 1 year, followed by a certain amount the second year. Our first reintroduction site done so well after 2 years, we didn't have to reintroduce anymore at that site. Um, and I mentioned that we're doing birds, juveniles, who've never reproduced previously. That's why our program is successful. People who've used adult burrowing owls. I remember years and years ago, they took, I think it was 10 pairs of owls from Mission College, and they moved them to the IBM facility down in Coyote Valley. So they put them in enclosures in artificial burrows, and they fed them dead mice. And when they took down the enclosures, something like 3 or 4 of the owls returned back to Mission College within a day or two. And after 2 years, there was no owls left at that site. So reintroducing adults is very, very difficult. Reintroducing juveniles is much more successful. And we choose a site that ideally has a healthy population of a healthy population of ground squirrels, or we put in a lot of artificial burrows until we get the ground squirrel population established. We want a site surrounded by ranch land so they can go foraging in those areas. And we want somewhere that has a diversity of prey. Um,
Hmm.
so more and more, we're focusing on south part of Santa Clara County as opposed to the urban areas because there's a limitation how many owls you can have at those urban areas. And disturbance is a big issue with those urban areas as well.
Yeah, I imagine. Ed has a couple of questions. He's wondering if the weepy seepy birds in Sunnyvale are part of the effort, and also if the birds in surrounding areas, if Santa Clara is reflective of the populations in San Mateo, Alameda, Monterey, etc. How does our population compare to those as far as success?
WPCP in Sunnyvale, there is no breeding owls there. The last breeding pair there was in 2017. There are wintering owls there.
That might be
Coming
what you're
down.
talking about. Yeah.
Yes. And then how's their site doing compared to other sites? San Mateo, Monterey have burrowing owls as a breeding species has become extirpated. Same with San
Hmm.
Francisco County. There is wintering owls in those sites, no breeding owls that I'm aware of.
But they are breeding in Alameda, right?
Yes, they're still breeding in Alameda. Not as many as historically, at least on the Bayside, up in the Diablo Range, the Altamont Pass. There's a lot more breeding burrowing owls up there.
Hmm. Albert is noting that burrowing owls don't seem to be afraid of humans as much as other birds, and does that contribute to their vulnerability?
Yes and no. Burrowing owls can habituate to people. I've seen them on golf courses. I've seen people get up to 3 feet away from a male in the breeding season, and a male stands its ground. They can get used to people. But I've seen them in more in other areas where if they're not used to people, they will flush. So that can disturbance is a major factor. Um, Unfortunately, I've seen some horrible things with burrowing owls. I saw a guy at Mission College when they used to have breeding burrowing owls there. Um, an owl usually has in the breeding season a natal burrow and several satellite burrows. And this guy was using the owls to exercise as dogs. The dog kept chasing the burrowing owl, would fly from one burrow to another burrow. And
Ugh.
when I approached him and told him, he goes, "Oh, it's not going to catch them. It's not fast enough to catch them. It's just getting a bit of exercise." He says, "You're exhausting that owl because it's trying to be protective." And then I encountered an individual who wanted to get photographs of burrowing owls. And he got a little peeved off because the owl was just standing at the burrow entrance doing nothing. He got tired taking photographs of it just standing there. So he decided to throw a rock at it to get it to fly. So I've seen abandonment of burrows because of disturbance from people.
Oh, that's horrible.
It's only a few people, but it only
Yeah,
takes a few individuals
right.
to cause nest abandonment.
Yeah. So Ina is asking if you sometimes work with private landowners or farmers.
Um, the release sites that we're working on, the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency has to make agreements with them. There's no private landowners. They're all large organizations because they want long-term agreements on protected land that'll be set that help out the burrowing owls. There are ranchers using that land. The ranchers don't own the land. So in Santa Clara County, we're not working with any private landowners.
Mhm.
I'm there are no burrowing owls, breeding burrowing owls on private land that I know of in Santa Clara County. And up to this overwintering program, we had the only burrowing owls were in the urban areas within Mountain View, Palo Alto, San Jose. There was none outside of those urban areas.
Yeah, yeah. Pauline is asking with the good number of organizations that are involved in promoting burrowing owl conservation, is there one organization that stands out? I would suspect that Habitat Agency would be there at the top.
Yes, I mentioned already. If it wasn't for the Habitat Agency, there would be no burrowing owls, or very few burrowing owls. There'd definitely be no reintroduced burrowing owls, and those populations are doing very well. We'd only have them in the historical areas, which would be down to 1 to 2 pairs. It is a costly program. It does require a lot of permits, and the Habitat Agency has the knowledge and the funding and the legal authority to implement these programs.
Hmm. Hmm. Gordon is pointing out Talon Ecological.
Well, we don't own any land. We're implementing the projects on behalf of the Habitat Agency. We're actually doing the physical work. They're paying for the funding of it. So if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be doing any of our. We'd be doing research. We wouldn't be doing the conservation work. You do
Right.
need permits to do any of these projects.
Of course, of course. I'm going to take two more questions. iPhone, who I don't know who this is, but I think he was raising his hand earlier. What is the total population? And I'm assuming that means species wide, but I'm not sure. Why don't you answer that?
I
I think it's
I don't know what it is species wide. I know a petition was filed last year to have the listing of the Burrowing Owls changed. At the moment, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife lists the Burrowing Owls as a species of special concern. That means you cannot kill the owls. Unfortunately, with mitigation, you can destroy their habitat if you mitigate somewhere else. That's been a major issue historically because in Santa Clara County, historically, you're allowed to do offsite mitigation. So they had a mitigation bank in at least two mitigation banks near Tracy. So for all the habitat that was destroyed in Santa Clara County, there were buying credits in these conservation banks near Tracy. It did not involve physically relocating the owls from Santa Clara County over to Tracy. So as you destroyed their habitat, once you evicted them, the population declined. Off the top of my head, I remember one number was about over 9,000 pairs of burrowing owls in the state of California. 70% of them were in the Imperial Valley on the border near Mexico. The issue with that side is historically there was very few owls there. It's a desert ecosystem. But with irrigation, they increased the number of grasshoppers and crickets. So the owls are living on embankments around the irrigation
Mhm.
canals. But unfortunately, a lot of those farmers down there are selling the water rights to LA and San Diego. So if they stop irrigating that area, that population of burrowing owls is going to collapse. So the California Department of Fish and Wildlife were supposed to make a decision October 25 on the petition. They've postponed that till I believe it's April of this year. See if the listing will change. And there's two options. One is to list the entire state population as threatened, or one is to list several subpopulations as endangered, including the burrowing owls of Santa Clara County.
Yeah, good.
So we're fingers crossed their listing will change. That's the only way you're going to save the state population is by protecting both the birds and their habitat.
Right.
No habitat, you can't support burrowing owls.
Exactly. I think I found a good question to end up on, but I've got a quick question of my own. We were in Merced recently and saw some burrowing owls there, and of course, they were among all the ground squirrels there on the auto tour at Merced National Wildlife. I was struck with how pale and golden those ground squirrels were, and I'm wondering, has the California ground squirrel been split, or is there a subspecies represented in the Central Valley that's different from the one we have here?
I'm not aware, don't know the answer to your question, not too sure about that. I remember when I was at San Jose State, they had ground squirrels which were fawn coloration, a very, very unusual, like a blonde fawn coloration.
Right, right,
And unfortunately, they went in and killed them. So you can get more different morphs. I mean, if you look at eastern gray squirrels, I've seen completely black morphs of
right.
individuals. It's just a different coloration.
Okay, all right. So I think the last question we'll take is, aside from contributing financially to the different organizations, what else can we do to help with support this effort?
I think one of the most beneficial things people can do is whatever city you're in, when city councils are voting for the development of areas, it's very important to voice your opinion, to let them know that it is important to save this species. I mean, we want future generations. I remember when I was a student at Mission College, we got to see burrowing owls. There's very few places you can actually get up close to see them anymore. They're mostly on protected areas, which don't have access for the public. So it'd be really great to see the population increasing. So people can, by voicing their opinions, going to council members, and asking to save burrowing owls. I mean, there are still burrowing owls, not necessarily breeding burrowing owls, but we have them in Alviso. We have them at Sunnyvale, Mountain View, Palo Alto, Moffett Airfield, um, all those cities there, by letting council know that this is an important species. Historically, it has been here. And by saving burrowing owls and grasslands, you also save many other species that are also grassland obligate species as well.
Mhm.
So it's not just burrowing owls are saving, it's many, many other species as well.
Yeah, mountain plovers for
Yes. Yeah.
yeah. So Michelle is asking for a clarification. The birds are not considered endangered at the moment. They are considered threatened. Is that correct?
No, they're considered a species of special concern.
Oh, okay.
But the petition is to change the listing,
Right.
either to threatened or some subpopulations as endangered.
It sure sounds like
Fingers,
it should be endangered.
yes. So fingers crossed. This April, when the California Commission makes a decision, they do change the listing.
Yeah, good. All right, I think we'll end there. Phil, thank you so much for
Anytime.
your presentation and all the work that you and the rest of Talon has done, Sandra. It's remarkable, and there's real progress being shown in the data that you've presented. And I just hope that you'll continue doing the work and continue seeing results. And we'll have you back again, I hope soon. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for your questions and your interest in this important topic. And we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Good night, everybody.